Along the Mississippi River Delta, hidden beneath layers of moss and centuries of silence, lies a story that should have been impossible. In the autumn of 1852, a property record surfaced in Ascension Parish, Louisiana. A legal document declaring that a man once enslaved had become the owner of the very plantation where he was born in chains. His name was Isaac Beecham, a name written in the same ink that once recorded his price as property. Within 8 months of his master's mysterious death, Isaac held the deed to that sprawling estate, Belmere Plantation, and within 40 days he married the widow of the man he had once called master. A white woman from a respected Creole family, Eleanor, whose hand in marriage defied every moral law and every statute of the antebellum South. The parish clerk who signed their license scribbled in the margin, "God have mercy on us all." Whispers spread like wildfire through Louisiana's cane fields, of poison, of betrayal, of restless spirits that refused to lie still. 6 people who questioned Isaac's rise died under circumstances the authorities refused to explain. Some called it divine retribution. Others called it murder. But the truth was darker than either. Because buried inside Belmere's ledgers and letters were clues to a transformation that challenged everything the South believed about power, race, and vengeance. Before we continue, subscribe to Grave of the Shadows, where forgotten crimes and forbidden histories are unearthed, one chilling secret at a time. Comment below and tell me which part of the world you're listening from so together we can uncover what really happened that haunted Belmere Plantation forever. The story of the slave who killed his master, married the widow, and rewrote the rules of his own damnation. Belmere Plantation stood on a bend of the Mississippi River, where the soil was black as ink and sweet with the scent of rotting cane. The estate stretched across nearly 800 acres, a world unto itself, guarded by oak trees that dripped Spanish moss like mourning veils. From a distance, the grand house shimmered in the Louisiana sun, its tall white columns and wide verandas proclaiming wealth and permanence. Up close, the wood was weathered, the shutters warped, and the air inside thick with humidity and secrets. The plantation was ruled by Charles Beecham, a man whose ambition was as sharp as the sickles his laborers carried. He inherited Belmere from his father, along with debts that would have buried most men. But Charles was not like most men. He turned misfortune into empire, through sugar, steam, and the sweat of the enslaved. By 1850, Belmere's mill roared day and night, fueled by human endurance and the promise of profit. Among those bound to the land was Isaac, born in the slave quarters behind the main house. He was no ordinary field hand. Even as a child he studied the plantation like a living machine, learning its rhythms, its hierarchies, its weaknesses. Charles recognized Isaac's intelligence early and brought him into the house to manage books, shipments, and accounts. For a slave it was privilege. For Isaac it was access, to knowledge, to trust, and to power. Eleanor, the young mistress, moved through the mansion like a ghost in silk. Her beauty softened nothing. Behind her calm eyes lay a misery few dared to notice. In that house, under chandeliers burning whale oil and shadow, 3 lives intertwined, one driven by greed, one by despair, and one by something far more dangerous, patience. The night Charles Beecham died began like any other sweltering evening along the river. The air was heavy enough to choke the breath, cicadas screamed from the trees, and lightning flickered far beyond the cane fields like silent artillery. Inside the main house, the master sat alone in his study, reviewing ledgers by lamplight. A decanter of claret stood half empty on the desk. He had dismissed his servants early, except for Isaac, who had delivered the day's accounts before retreating to the quarters. Or so everyone believed. Around midnight, a single gunshot shattered the silence. It echoed across the river, startling birds from the trees. When Louisa, the housekeeper, reached the study, she found the door ajar and the smell of powder in the air. Charles slumped in his chair, a hunting rifle balanced across his knees, blood sprayed against the wall behind him. It looked like suicide, clean, convenient, unchallenged. But some details refused to fit. The weapon's angle was wrong. The burn marks on his hands were faint. The ink on an unsigned letter beside the body was still wet. Dr. Whitaker, summoned before dawn, noted these inconsistencies in his private journal but wrote, self-inflicted, on the official report. Eleanor wept until her voice failed, collapsing beside the coffin she ordered sealed before anyone could view the body again. Isaac handled the funeral arrangements with chilling composure, efficient, calm, unquestioning. To the parish authorities the matter was closed. To Belmere's workers, it was a whisper that refused to die. The rifle had killed more than a man that night. It had shattered the balance that held the plantation together. Because after Charles Beauchamp's death, power at Belmere no longer answered to the laws of Louisiana. it answered to Isaac. At dawn, the sheriff arrived with 2 deputies and a parish judge. They examined the blood-spattered study, questioned the servants, and listened to Dr. Whitaker summarize his findings. Within hours, the verdict was tidy: suicide brought on by drink and despair. The officials left with polite nods, and the neighbors spoke of Charles's tragic weakness over breakfast the next morning. Yet no one who had lived inside Belmere believed that story. Eleanor, newly widowed, shut herself away in the east wing, her mourning veil drawn even when no one was watching. The servants whispered that her grief sounded more like fear. She ate little, slept less, and startled at every knock on her door. Louisa crossed herself whenever she passed the study, claiming that the master's spirit walked the hall at midnight. Only Isaac seemed untouched. He supervised the burial, managed the accounts, and kept the plantation running as if nothing had changed. His calm unsettled everyone. When the overseer, Samuel Green, mentioned it to a friend, the man replied, maybe he was ready for the old master to die. A week later, rumors began to grow teeth. The doctor's clerk told a tavern full of men that there had been no powder burns on Charles's hands. A field hand swore he saw Isaac near the main house that night, carrying something wrapped in cloth. The parish priest urged restraint, but even he confessed privately that the whole affair smelled of sin and calculation. By the time the last mourners left, Belmere Plantation had split into 2 camps: those who pitied the widow and those who feared the freed mind of the slave who served her. The truth hung in the humid air, heavy and invisible, waiting for someone brave enough to breathe it. Weeks turned into months and Belmere began to move again, but differently, quietly, like a body that had learned to breathe without a heartbeat. The cane still grew, the mill still thundered, but every decision now ran through Isaac Beecham. He met with traders, signed receipts, and balanced the ledgers with precision Charles himself would have admired. The overseer, Samuel Green, took orders without realizing he was taking them. The widow, Eleanor, rarely appeared in daylight, yet her signature began to surface on every document Isaac prepared. It started with small things: a shipment redirected, a new contract negotiated, a debt quietly settled. Then came larger ones: the sale of unused land, the hiring of new guards, and the replacement of household staff who couldn't be trusted. Isaac said it was to protect the widow's interests, and people believed him because he said it with calm authority and perfect grammar. Those who worked closest to him began to feel a strange unease. The man who once bowed now walked through the estate with measured confidence. He spoke to merchants as an equal and to subordinates with the patience of someone used to obedience. Louisa, old and wise, muttered that Belmere's master had never really died, only changed skin. At the Sunday service, Father Rockefort avoided Isaac's gaze during the sermon on pride and retribution. The parish whispers had shifted from shock to dread. Every rumor that reached the plantation gates seemed to wilt there, as if swallowed by the thick, warm air of fear and fascination. By autumn, no one dared question who truly ran Belmere. The widow was a name on paper, the overseer was a shadow. And Isaac, the man once bought, sold, and numbered, had become master in all but name. On a gray morning in December 1852, the parish clerk of Ascension sat trembling behind his desk as Isaac Beecham and Eleanor entered his office together. The clerk thought it a cruel joke, until Isaac laid down a stack of notarized documents and spoke in a tone that brooked no disbelief. His freedom papers were valid, signed by Charles himself months before the master's death. The will, now in probate, left the plantation in Eleanor's control. There was, in the clerk's words, no law written that forbade what decency could not allow. 3 hours later, a license was issued. The clerk, sweating through his collar, added a note in the margin: God forgive the living for what the dead cannot stop. That evening, Belmere's parlor filled with candlelight and whispers. The ceremony was performed by a defrocked priest from New Orleans, a man rumored to bless graves and bribes alike. Louisa and Samuel stood as witnesses, pale, silent, bound by circumstance. When the vows ended, Isaac placed a simple gold band on Eleanor's shaking hand. Her voice trembled, but the word "I do" still found its way through the heavy air. By dawn, news of the marriage raced through the parish like fire through dry cane. Some called it blasphemy, others witchcraft. Merchants refused Belmere's business. Plantation owners struck Isaac's name from their ledgers. Yet none dared confront him directly. The man they mocked as a slave now rode past their gates dressed in fine linen, his posture regal, his eyes unreadable. What began as scandal soon turned to legend, a tale whispered in every church pew and river tavern. A former slave had taken his master's place, his title, and his widow. And Louisiana, bound by its own laws, could do nothing but watch, the marriage silenced no one, it provoked the entire parish into fury. Ministers thundered from pulpits, calling Belmere a house of desecration. Planters spoke of restoring order by any means. Yet each man who dared to act against Isaac Beauchamp met a swift and inexplicable fate. The first was Samuel Green, the overseer who once commanded the fields. 2 weeks after muttering that he would see Belmere cleansed, he was found near the mill ditch, his face pale, his body rigid, his throat marked by something no doctor could name. Dr. Whitaker called it a seizure of mysterious cause. The second, a priest who condemned the marriage publicly, fell from his horse on the road to New Orleans, his skull crushed against the same stones he had blessed. Others vanished quietly, a merchant who refused Belmere's trade, a clerk who hinted that the Freedom Papers were forged, even a field hand who claimed to have seen a shadow leave the study the night Charles died. By midsummer, fear had done what law could not. No one questioned Isaac again. He expanded the estate's reach, selling sugar through distant intermediaries who cared more for profit than scandal. Within months, Belmere's books gleamed with wealth while its halls whispered of death. Eleanor moved through those halls like a woman caught between privilege and penitence, beautiful, hollow, obedient. Her laughter, once gentle, was now brittle as glass. When she passed Isaac in the corridor, she lowered her eyes. When he spoke, she trembled, not from terror but from recognition of the power she had helped unleash. The parish that had once shunned Belmere now avoided even speaking its name. Those who lived closest to its gates called it cursed. Those who knew better called it earned. By 1854, Belmere Plantation stood like a kingdom cut off from the world. The neighboring estates refused to trade, letters went unanswered, and parish officers crossed the river rather than ride past its gates. The great house seemed alive only at night, lamps burning behind shuttered windows, the low hum of conversation drifting through the humid dark. Inside, Isaac Beauchamp ruled with precision that bordered on obsession. Every ledger balanced, every barrel of sugar accounted for, every servant's movement recorded in neat columns of ink. What had begun as order was now a ritual, an effort to control whatever remained of his unraveling world. Eleanor had faded into near silence. She seldom left her chambers, her voice a whisper even to her maid. When visitors came, she appeared pale and distant, her eyes fixed somewhere past the living. Rumors spread that she spoke to the portrait of her late husband in the upstairs hall, begging forgiveness that never came. Then came the fires. A storage barn ignited without warning, destroying tools and cane stores. The next week, a stable collapsed, killing 2 horses. No culprit was found, yet Isaac ordered guards posted around the grounds. He slept less, ate little, and carried a pistol even within his own home. To those who still worked the fields, he seemed haunted, by ghosts, by guilt, or by the knowledge that his power rested on a mountain of unburied secrets. When Dr. Whitaker last visited that summer, he wrote in his notes, "The master of Belmere is surrounded by wealth and wretchedness in equal measure. He has built a fortress to contain his freedom, and in so doing has walled himself within it." Belmere still stood tall, but the silence inside it had begun to rot. The summer of 1859 arrived heavy with heat and rumor. Belmere's fields lay half untended, its workers drifting away one by one, freed by Isaac Beauchamp's strange new command, "You owe me nothing." In one sweep, he dissolved the system that had once chained him. 73 people walked off the plantation carrying nothing but their names, and the parish called him mad. Perhaps he was. The empire he had built through cunning and blood was now collapsing by his own hand. Eleanor did not live to see the harvest. Her body weakened as if grief itself had eaten through her bones. On October 17, 1859, she died in her chamber, the same room where Charles had once dreamed of prosperity. The doctor recorded the cause as melancholia, though those who washed her body swore they saw bruises around her wrists, faint but deliberate. Isaac did not attend the funeral. He sent a wreath of sugarcane blossoms and a single note, "May she find the peace I never will." After her burial, Isaac dismissed the remaining servants, sold the livestock and sealed the great house. For 3 days, the chimneys smoked as he burned ledgers, letters and portraits, the evidence of everything he had conquered and destroyed. On the morning of January 12, 1860, a passing ferryman saw a lone figure riding toward the river, dressed in a dark coat and carrying a satchel. He was never seen again. Some said he sailed to Mexico, others that he drowned in the delta's black water. When officials entered Belmere months later, they found the room stripped bare, the mirrors draped in linen, and a single inscription carved into Charles's old desk. "Freedom is a debt the living must pay." And no one ever dared erase it, Years later, Belmere Plantation was little more than a ruin reclaimed by the river. The cane fields had turned wild, the chimneys had collapsed, and vines strangled the iron gates that once guarded the proud estate. Travelers spoke of strange lights flickering in the upper windows, of footsteps echoing through the empty halls, and of a voice whispering by the riverbank when the fog rolled in, a voice said to be Isaac Beauchamp's reciting the same line carved into the desk. Freedom is a debt the living must pay. Old parish records confirmed only fragments: his marriage license, his manumission, and a ledger of debts cleared by an anonymous benefactor in 1861. Beyond that, the trail vanished. Some claimed Isaac escaped to Veracruz, living as a wealthy trader under another name. Others swore he drowned himself the night he realized freedom had cost him everything. But even the skeptics admitted one thing: what Isaac did at Belmere changed the unwritten rules of the South. He had proven that intellect could be sharper than a whip, that a slave could master the very system that enslaved him, and that liberation born in blood was still liberation. Yet the question lingered long after the house was gone: was Isaac Beauchamp a man driven to justice or to damnation? Did he expose the hypocrisy of his oppressors, or become the mirror of their cruelty? These are the questions that history never answers, because history remembers facts, not souls. If this story unsettled you, subscribe to Grave of the Shadows, where forgotten sins and forbidden truths rise from the earth again. And in the comments below, tell me, was Isaac Beauchamp a hero of freedom, or the very monster his world created? By the turn of the 20th century, Belmere Plantation existed only in stories told by riverboat captains and parish elders who remembered their grandfathers' warnings. The fields were gone, the sugar mill dismantled, and the land divided into smaller farms that never quite prospered. Yet the legend of Isaac Beauchamp refused to fade. Each generation added its own embellishment. Some said he had returned in disguise to watch over the ruins, others claimed his ghost wandered the levee, carrying the satchel he took when he disappeared. Children dared one another to touch the old stone well at midnight, swearing they heard a man whisper their names from below. In 1903, workers clearing a section of riverbank uncovered a rusted strongbox. Inside were ledgers charred by age, a silver ring engraved with the initials EB, and a letter signed simply IB. The handwriting matched the old plantation accounts. The final line read, "If freedom must devour the heart to prove itself, may God forgive the taste." The newspapers called it the confession of a ghost. Historians debated whether the man ever existed at all. To some, Isaac was a myth shaped by guilt, a warning of what the enslaved might have done if given the chance. To others, he was a genius who outwitted a corrupt world and vanished into its shadows. No one ever found his grave. Perhaps there wasn't one. Perhaps that was the point. And so, when the mist rises off the river at dawn and the wind hums through the reeds, people still pause and listen, for the sound of hooves, for the rustle of linen, for the faint echo of a voice that once defied an empire. The legend of Belmere lives because guilt never dies. The story of Isaac Beauchamp isn't just a tale of one man's ascent from bondage to power, it is a mirror held to an era built on cruelty, pride, and denial. Belmere's tragedy forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Oppression doesn't vanish when the oppressed rise. It mutates, wearing a new face, echoing the same hunger for control. Isaac's brilliance freed him from chains, but not from the darkness they forged within him. He mastered the laws that enslaved him, outsmarted those who claimed divinity and ownership, and then discovered that freedom gained through fear is another kind of captivity. In the end, history remembers him not as saint or sinner, but as proof that the human soul cannot remain silent forever. When justice is denied, it will claw its way out, through ink, through fire, through blood if it must. Belmere burned not because of one man's ambition, but because a whole world believed it could own another's life without consequence. Today nothing of that plantation remains, only the river still flowing, slow and indifferent, past where its gates once stood. Yet somewhere in its current, perhaps the spirit of Isaac still moves, a whisper reminding us that freedom has always demanded a price, and those who forget it are doomed to pay again. If this story stirred something in you, subscribe to Grave of the Shadows, where forgotten histories rise to speak their truths. And in the comments below, tell me, was Isaac Beauchamp a man of vengeance or a martyr of circumstance? Could any of us, trapped in his world, have chosen differently? Because some ghosts don't haunt for revenge, they haunt to be remembered.